Okay, commentary attempt number 1. You're gonna like the video if I get this in one take, because I probably won't. Anyway, here we are, T110E3, Whirlwind CK, I think. Whirlwind CK in the T110E3. Most likely, the best example in the entire game of your classic bully TD, your inflexible TD that suffers horrifically when or if it gets outflanked. I do believe that there's no vehicle in the game that exemplifies that style of gameplay, both its advantages and disadvantages, than the T110E3. I'd be up for discussion about that in the comments. Is there any tank that you feel better represents that style of gameplay than the T110E3? In my humble opinion, no, there is not. Now, what can we talk about with the T110E3? Well, let's talk about its brawling playstyle as we roll out here on Safe Haven. You gotta like the map choice in the T110E3. The map by its very nature kind of forces that close quarters brawly playstyle, and this tank is equipped to handle that 305mm of frontal armor, second only on paper to the Badger at 355, I believe. And the thing about the Badger is that armor is only one tiny spot, whereas damn, that defender's having a bad day. I'll tell you what, let's point out this. This is something that Whirlwind does a few times within the replay, and I don't know whether it's a lapse in judgment or poor awareness of the weaknesses of the T110E3. As we talk about 305mm of frontal armor, exceptional. Potentially you can make an argument to say that this is the best armoured frontal tank in the entire game, still to this day. However, it is a T110E tank, and all T110E tanks in the game have 76mm of side armour and 38 at the rear. Anything other than frontally, they are not competitive in the slightest, and especially if we're talking about the E3. Tell you what, I'll get tanks.gg up to demonstrate this, especially if we're talking about the E3. Let's have a quick look. Ooh, lads, the T110E3 has some crippling weak spots. Look at this behemoth of a tank. It is absolutely fantastically armoured, and yet, look at that pixel right on the side there. It's 76mm. That's the side armor showing through. You can find that 76mm value on so very many of these American tanks, but here on the E3, if you're backing off around a corner like that, you are exposing a gargantuan weak spot. And this is something that Whirlwind tends to have a problem with in his gameplay here, is that when he tries to retreat around a corner, he exposes the side of his tank very prematurely. In the T110E3, it's often better to just reverse straight on and sort of wiggle your way back in so that you don't present that weak spot. That said, he's going to rack up a monster game here, so I can't really judge. Now let's talk about the gun, shall we? Let's talk about the gun. This thing, oh, it wields a weapon, oh it does, 155mm gun. And now I start with that because it's worth taking note of. Unlike other caliber guns that do the same 750 alpha damage, which that defender over there is well and truly feeling. Unlike other guns that are 152mm or 150mm, like you might find on the Germans, 152 on the Russians, this is a 155, and that means that the overmatch system can allow it to do damage to vehicles that simply wouldn't be damaged by getting shot in that place by the 150 or the 152. These are spots on enemy tanks like the Super Conqueror on the roof or the Conqueror on the roof. So it is actually worth taking note of the caliber of these American TDs, because they allow you that ability to engage a wider variety of vehicles, which is nice. You know what else lets you engage a huge variety of vehicles is 295mm of base pen, which we won't be seeing any of here because this man is firing full APCR, that is 375mm of penetration fighting its way into the front of the AE phase 1 here with the .36 base accuracy on this thing and taking all of the advantage from that 2.5 second aim time. And you do really have to come to appreciate just how many surfaces on enemy tanks you can pen when you have 375mm of APCR pen. And if we're indulging ourselves in good penetration, you want to be thankful for the old meta HE that is still on this tank. 90mm of penetration with 1100 alpha damage. A lot of 750 alpha damage guns in the game at the moment, cap out at 950 on the HE shells, so the old meta HE stacking up really well with that 1.1k. It was lucky when rounding the corner there not to take 2 pens from the mill, took 1 frontally and absorbed 1 in the tracks, which is very odd. But let's just look at the potential of this tank. 375mm of pen, and look at that. That is one of the most overpowered tier 8 heavies in the entire game. Hold down and it's just butter. It is paper versus the T110E3. Now, normally in a T110E3, because this thing has limitations. We talked about the side armor, we talked about the rear armor. We're looking at 25.03 average traverse speed, right? That's awful. Well, I mean, honestly, it's not awful. If you think the E75, which has a pretty good traverse speed, actually has 30, right, on hard terrain, so it's not woeful, but it's a limiting factor of the tank especially when you think of it in relation to the fact that this thing is turretless and it only has an 8-degree gun arc to either side. 8 degrees to the right, 8 degrees to the left. But here's a positive, 8 degrees down as well, 8 degrees of gun depression. Very nice, but probably not appreciated as much as it might be on this map. Speaking of 8s, if we double it, we can get up to 16, which is the gun elevation of this tank. And we're talking about the limitations of this thing. In this situation, initially, when you had tanks out there, you had tanks here, it looked very complicated, and it's an interesting thing that I want to raise about this tank. And I've drawn up some visual aids to help in this demonstration here, so let me just get those up. Okay, so here we are. This is basically a general overview of fairly basic principles when it comes to turretless TDs. We've got our green TD here facing a lot of opponents. So you can see when he's at distance, right? When he is at distance, he is able to keep all of his opponents to his front and within his gun arc, which is very good for a turretless tank with not a lot of flexibility. You'll notice that as soon as he closes to his opponents, now he has to traverse his tank in order to engage those multiple opponents. So against multiple opponents, it's really not good to be in close quarters. However, Safe Haven is a map where the map itself can be deceiving, because you can see that half of these guys are actually above rather than to the side. They don't have the potential to flank as easily, which is kind of an interesting dynamic of this map. Let's look at how the enemy should be playing in this coming engagement against this T110E3. We've got another demo here. Right. And in this situation, we're assuming that the T110E3 are good here. Whirlwind is the red marker, and we're looking at the enemy team trying to play against him. Now, they're on the corner here. Now, what they want to do, as you can see, is present multiple angles at the same time. And at this point, the only winning move for Whirlwind in this scenario is to relinquish the position, right? Because then you get back into the situation where he can now engage both vehicles at once, right? And the important thing is, there, from the enemy team's point of view, they've forced him out of position without taking any damage. And that's what I'd like to see from the enemy team in the rest of this game, is not engaging him frontally, not engaging him one by one, but coming from multiple angles and multiple different directions at the same time. That is what they need to do if they want to get one over on our hero Whirlwind here. Let us see how they do. Oh, Whirlwind putting that 25.03 traverse speed to get use, worming his way out here, seeing if he can find anything. Now, got the horsepower per ton of 12.38. The T110E is certainly not a fast vehicle, but 24 kilometers an hour top speed, benefited by the turbocharger that he's using on the vehicle here to take it up to 28, with a 10 in reverse coming up from the 8, which is the base of this vehicle. 8. That is a plague that affects another tier 10 tank destroyer, which is a love of mine. Lucky bounce from the T30 there, the FV4005, also having 8 on the reverse speed, and you can feel it here. He's grinding backwards even with the benefit of that turbocharger. If we're speaking about equipment, he has a gun rammer in the first slot, and this man is fully field modded with the benefit of the survivability slot, complementing that improved hardening that he's put in the second slot, taking his hit points up from a base 2050 all the way up to 2350. No one will say no to a bonus 300 hit points, but this is potentially a difficult scenario. Very difficult scenario. Takes an APCR shell from the mill there. And this is untenable. He cannot push into this. Like, you send me an replay where he pushes into this, I will send you an replay that I've not commented on because he'd be feckin' dead. One thing I want to talk about here from this T30's point of view. T30 looking at a friendly American TD and is going to feel very emasculated by the sheer girthy power of the hull of this tank. Let us look at the Cupola. Because that's what people do. The enemy team, they will look at your Cupola. They will look at it as if it's a weak spot. It is not by any stretch of the imagination. This Cupola has 275 millimeters of base armor. That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Look at the thickness of this. Very few shells in the game are going to be going through that. And you know why? It's not just 275. It's because it's not a flat Cupola. This ain't no loud pressure. Let's look at it in game quickly. Look at this Cupola, right? Look at the front of it. Look at this, and then look at the model. Look at the angle on that. That's 275 millimeters of base armor. The Cupola of the T110E3, unless you are blessed with ludicrous penetration, is not a weak spot in any capacity. All right, so bear that in mind, and it perhaps is what is preventing the T30 from displaying more aggression in this situation. And I would have expected him to take a 155mm shell on the exit from that T30 there, but he spots this 140 coming up behind him, looking for a good old chunk of damage. Boom! Right into the engine compartment, and turns towards the T57 Heavy, assuming, I think, that the Torn Van is going to cover him against the 140. Torn Van, unfortunately, misses his shot. And that was honestly quite a lucky pickup there on the upper plate of the 140. Not that it penned the upper plate, but they actually connected. Now, T57 Heavy's found himself in a difficult situation. T57 Heavy, T110E3 isn't exactly good on the chase, but it's good enough to low roll his booty. Not a severe low roll. And T30's coming up looking for revenge, looking to kill the successor to a friend of the line. bounces 276 millimeters off the front of the T110E3 there. Didn't have a great deal of time to aim. Now here is an E100 and this situation is hotting up. Is he gonna get a penning shot? Even at that angle, the APCR shell's doing a fine job against the side spaced skirts of the E100 there. Now where do you want to go at this point? It is 8-12, down by 4,000 health, and the aim was correct. That Emil honestly making an extremely poor decision there. Committing when he had absolutely no need to, and this E100 continuing the poor decision tree, getting it into close quarters with a T110E3. This man has limited his recourse options severely at this point, very severely. An APCR shell taken from the Borsig there does tell us that the Borsig is using the 128mm gun, as there's no APCR shells available on the 150mm gun that Borsig has. There's both a good and a bad thing. Borsig fire is better with the smaller gun. However, fire is better with the smaller gun, but oh my word, I want to talk about that quickly. It's better with the smaller gun, but it could potentially have a better chance of penning with the big gun, as it's blessed with 334mm of pen on that big gun's heat shell. So, gonna be grateful for the lack of pen, but not so grateful for the rate of fire. And that 90mm pen, 1.1k average damage HE shell, rolling low with the pen on the Borsig there. Now, he sees the UDES poke up behind him and gets out of there just before the UDES can get into siege mode. Now, it can't be one shot by the Borsig. 490 alpha damage on a Rheinmetall Borsig with the 128mm gun. Let's see if he can turn his tank around quickly enough to compete. I'm surprised, honestly, that he targeted the UDES there. I don't like that decision. I don't. I would have killed the Borsig. I really would have. He had a HE shell loaded, and he did manage to pen it on the UDES. I mean, either way, the UDES is going to be a two-shot, likely. Unless, I don't know, if he was banking on the pen, then he got unlucky, because he loaded, didn't he? So it's difficult. Hindsight's kicking me in the ass a bit there. Oh, but maybe if I had this game, I would have shot the Borsig and managed to get myself into deeper water. We shall see. Now, sideswiping in the T110E3 is a bit of a difficult position, and at this point, his gameplay is dictated entirely by the G-Saw. Or is it, as he actually sideswipes a Borsig shell very well there? Yeah, at this point he's thinking, okay, is my G-Saw gonna live? If my G-Saw lives, I can play passively, I can wait for his backup and his help, right? So he's looking at the map like that, and the G-Saw manages to crash, interestingly enough, and you can see immediately that prompts movement by Whirlwind here, because he knows that now the tick is talking, right? The tick is clocking. The clock is talking. If he waits there, he's gonna be flanked. He's gonna be killed. At that point, the choice has been taken away from you. You don't have the luxury of an option. You gotta go forward, because it's either you take the chance now and potentially win, or you wait around and you just die. He made the choice. He picked up the UDES. Now there's Borsig once again looking, and it does look like he knows the T110E3 has just picked up the kill on the UDES, coming forward. Oh, thank you very much to the reload of the T110E3 for that one. Now, 1 versus 2, one of which is an M53 M55, blessed with a 203mm cannon, well capable of destroying the T110E3 if it gets a hit into the side or the rear, alas. Or positively, depending on your inclination. misses completely. Honestly, unlikely, very unlikely to secure the kill, even if he got a direct hit from that angle. But now, 1 versus 1 in the T110 E3 on the edge of a pools medal, and potentially looking at picking up 12,000 damage. Gotta be keeping an eye on that Sixth Sense, and are we gonna get a heartbreak at the end of this game? That turbocharger is going to be coming in clutch now, pushing that top speed up to 28, as we talked about earlier. And he does spot the TNH, who seems to be rather lacking in connection, as it happens. Rather unfortunate. You would have liked to see a tense standoff at the end, but the TNH, it does seem, has disconnected from the game. And I was thinking at this point, is Whirlwind gonna squander his shells, maybe see if he could pick up a Fade-In's medal into the bargain there? Would have been very cheeky. But that is one of the most brutal poundings I have seen from a T110E3. What a absolutely lovely game. Perfect scenario for the tank. Right. And honestly, poor play by the enemy team. There wasn't a huge amount that Whirlwind did wrong. The only things that I picked up on were just the times at which he exposed the side of his tank that weren't optimal. But what a result. What a result. And you can't criticize anyone for taking advantage of mistakes presented to them by the enemy team. That is what you do in the World of Tanks. Let's have a look at the post-battle. I'm sorry, can we talk about it? Can we talk about it, though? Oh, please, it can't be genuine. That cannot be genuine. That cannot be genuine. And let me, poor, unfair, antisocial human waste. You ruined my game. Using gold ammunition is just unfair and antisocial. What is armor good for if unfair player like you use gold ammunition? Think about yourself. You ruin other people's game with your unfair and I don't think this guy knows what antisocial means. Antisocial behavior. This is a game, play fair. Yeah, Whirlwind, you dick, play fair. You know, use the game mechanics. What the fuck? Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, T110E3, what a monster of a game. No surprise to see the ace tanker. What weapons have we got? We got a bruiser, spotter. There's something you don't see every day in the E3. Hand of God, duelist, fire for effect, shellproof. How lovely. Complements nicely the hero medal collection here. Paul's medal looks like his first on the tank. Steel wool, that's his first ace tanker. Wow. No doubt the last. No doubt the last. Lol. No doubt not the last if he keeps playing like that. Steel wool, as expected, high caliber, and a bonus top gun as well. Look at that, 12,309 damage. Only had to travel 2.26 kilometers to do it. It's nice when the enemy comes in front of your gun, is it not? There's not a huge amount more to talk about, but 1,813 base XP in a tier 10 vehicle is absolutely astounding. Whew, only losing 18,000 credits as well, but holy crap. Damaged 11 of the enemy tanks, killed 10 of them. Absolutely spectacular. Whirlwind, thank you very much for sending that replay. Best of luck in your further T110 E3 games. And as for everyone else, thank you for spending some time with me. Thank you for enjoying my commentary and my perspective. If you'd like to see more videos by myself, there'll be some playlists popping up on the outro screen. Do be sure to peruse at your leisure. Thank you very much, and good day.
From Mainz to Malinovka, he is a scary spotter, working fancy tanking magic, just like Harry Potter. And well, enemies have tendencies to be nothing but cannon fodder. His is rising like a helicopter, yeah. And today I thank the universe for jingles showing me the Steven in his even. Break and ruin, Burke, your style, your skills, your content had an impact like